3 months. $20,000. Endless hours of planning my sister's perfect wedding. I did it all thinking I was rebuilding our broken family. Then security stopped me at the door. You're listed as the help. What happened next shattered illusions, exposed betrayal, and changed everything forever. I spent 3 months of my life planning my sister Jessica's wedding down to the last detail. Not just because I run a successful event company, but because I genuinely believed it would bring our family back together after losing Dad. I negotiated with florists at dawn. I handpicked blush-toned orchids to match her vision board. I even stayed up until 3 a.m. calligraphy writing place cards for 200 guests, every swirl of ink a symbol of my effort to heal old wounds. Jessica wanted a showstopper wedding, and I delivered. I pulled every favor I had from top-tier vendors, cut personal checks when her budget cracked under pressure, and took care of things nobody even noticed, because that's what family does. Or so I thought. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early 3 p.m. dressed in the navy cocktail dress Jessica had personally approved for family portraits. I stepped through the marble lobby of the Riverside Grand Hotel, the same one I'd helped transform that morning with $10,000 worth of roses and baby's breath. I had my checklist in mind, catering confirmation, sound check, and a last-minute touch-up for the bride. My heels echoed across the polished floor as I headed toward the ballroom, focused and calm, even excited. This was the culmination of everything. Then came the stop. "Excuse me, ma'am." A security guard stepped into my path. He was polite but firm, holding an iPad. "Are you with the Thompson-Bradley wedding?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "I'm Rachel Thompson, the bride's sister." He frowned, scrolling. Then he scrolled again. "Could you spell your last name?" "Thompson. Thompson. Same as the bride." After a moment, he turned the screen toward me. There it was, Rachel Thompson, event coordinator, listed under vendors. I blinked. "That's not right." "I'm family." "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "We have to follow the list provided by the bride and her mother. You're cleared for vendor access only." Vendor access. The back door. The service entrance. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Where are you?" "The photographer needs you to check the lighting." Not, "We're taking family photos." Not, "Come join us, just work." It hit me like a slap. The realization that I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being erased. I asked the guard to call someone my mother, Linda Thompson. 5 minutes passed as guests began arriving. People who knew me, who had watched me grow up, who walked right past me while I stood there like staff. Then Mom appeared. Perfectly poised in a designer dress, heels clicking like judgment on marble. "Rachel," she said with that cool, clipped tone she used for employees who stepped out of line. "Why are you causing a scene?" "I'm on the vendor list," I said. "Not the guest list." "As you should be. You're working today, aren't you?" She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. $3,000. "We agreed on this amount," she said. "No, we hadn't. Not once." The $20,000 I'd spent, the hours I'd invested, the emotional labor of holding the family together after Dad's death, reduced to a vendor payment. I looked at the ballroom through the glass doors. I saw my sister laughing, my mother organizing photos, the family I thought I was part of. "You're the help, Rachel," my mother whispered. "You always have been," and in that moment I understood. I wasn't planning a wedding to rebuild the family. I was building a stage for them to push me off of, and I was done. The wedding humiliation wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was the final act in a story that started the day my father died. 2 years earlier, when Dad collapsed in his office at Thompson Enterprises, I was the one who held it all together. While Mom and Jessica were incapacitated by grief, I organized the funeral, contacted key stakeholders, met with employees, and kept the company from spinning into chaos. People called me so strong, so capable, and said I was just like him. They meant it as a compliment. At least I thought they did. But 3 weeks later, I began to realize how the narrative was shifting without me. I stopped by our family home one afternoon and saw Harold Morrison's car in the driveway at S. Lawyer. Curious, I walked in to find Mom and Jessica at the dining table with stacks of legal papers. "Oh, Rachel," Mom said casually, barely looking up. "We're just handling some estate formalities. Nothing you need to worry about." Estate formalities? I asked. Shouldn't I be here too? It's mostly legalese, she said with a shrug. You know how confusing that stuff can be. This. From the woman who watched me graduate summa cum laude with a business degree. I was literally running a profitable event company, but suddenly I couldn't be trusted to comprehend a will? Harold Morrison looked uncomfortable. Perhaps Rachel should. Harold. Mom cut him off sharply. We've got this covered. Rachel's busy with her little event business. Little. That was the word she used. That little business had just coordinated the governor's inaugural ball. But in Mom's eyes, Jessica's part-time retail gig was more legitimate because Jessica was the daughter she wanted in the spotlight. I didn't argue. I told myself it was grief, that people say strange things when they're hurting. But it wasn't grief. It was a carefully orchestrated erasure. The next blow came 6 months later. Jessica announced her engagement over Sunday dinner with sparkly eyes and a fake modest tone. I need the perfect wedding planner, she said. Someone who really understands our family's place in the community. Uncle Pete had smiled and started to speak. Rachel could. Oh, I couldn't ask Rachel to work for free, Jessica laughed. That laugh. That fake little laugh that always meant the opposite. Unless, would you mind, Ra, as my wedding gift? The table went silent. I looked around. Mom was already smiling, clearly in on the plan. Aunts and uncles waited for my response like an audience watching a magician's trick. I had 2 options. Say no and be the selfish, bitter sister, or say yes and become a glorified employee. I swallowed my pride. Of course, I said. Family helps family. Dad used to say that all the time. Back when it meant loyalty, sacrifice, and being there for one another. But in their mouths, those words tasted different. They twisted his values into servitude. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that if I just kept giving, they'd finally see my value. But what I didn't realize then was that they already had seen it and decided to use it, not honor it. Every decision they made, from keeping me out of the estate meeting to putting me on the vendor list, was part of a larger, quieter strategy. They weren't excluding me by accident. They were rewriting history one legal form, one seating chart, one dismissive smile at a time. And I had allowed it. Until now, it started with Jessica's syrupy voice at Sunday dinner. I just need the perfect planner, she'd said, eyes shining across the table. Someone who really gets the kind of wedding our family deserves. Uncle Pete began to speak, clearly thinking of me, but Jessica cut him off with a laugh. Oh, I couldn't ask Rachel to work for free. That wouldn't be fair. Unless, she turned to me with a sparkle in her eye. You'd consider it your gift to me? From sister to sister? And just like that, the trap was set. I felt everyone looking at me, waiting. The same way they'd looked at Dad during board meetings. I recognized the unspoken pressure, the way silence could corner a person better than any argument. Refuse and I'd be the bitter, cold-hearted sister who wouldn't help. Except, and I was no longer a sister. I was the help, again, so I smiled and said what everyone needed me to say. Of course. Family helps family. That phrase had once meant something real when Dad said it. Now it was just code for, do the work. Expect nothing. And oh, did I work? Over the next 3 months, I lived and breathed Jessica's wedding. I negotiated with florists, venues, photographers, and caterers. When her budget collapsed under the weight of her vision board, I stepped in again and again. $500 for extra calligraphy signage? I paid it. $4,000 deposit to secure the band she just had to have. I paid it, the custom blush and gold dance floor she couldn't imagine not having. You guessed it, I covered the difference. By the end, I'd poured over $20,000 of my own money into the wedding. Not to mention the unbillable hours I clocked hundreds of them, coordinating and organizing every single detail. All because my family promised, we'll sort it all out after. Just keep the receipts. I kept them. All right, every last one. And yet, despite everything I gave, I began to notice the subtle ways they pushed me to the margins. During bridal fittings, I was on my phone juggling vendor calls while Jessica's sorority sisters laughed and sipped champagne. At one fitting, a bridesmaid looked confused. Aren't you in the wedding party? Jessica jumped in before I could answer. Rachel's too busy being amazing behind the scenes. She doesn't like the spotlight, not really her thing. Not really my thing. Standing beside my sister on her wedding day wasn't my thing. But giving up weekends, holidays, sleep-in money, that was apparently my specialty. That line stuck with me. They didn't just want me to help. They wanted to reassign my role. Not the sister, the staff. And every time I spoke up, even gently, I got shut down. "Oh, Rachel," Mom would say. Not everything is about you, but it was. Not about ego, but about identity. I wasn't being thanked or appreciated, I was being erased. Smiled at while being shoved off stage. The day before the wedding, I asked Jessica if she wanted a moment with just us sisters. A tradition we used to share before birthdays, before big milestones. She blinked, confused. "I thought you'd be too busy making everything perfect. You're so good at that stuff." And there it was again. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I could do for them. And soon, I'd find out just how far they were willing to take that mindset when I was told to enter my own sister's wedding through the service entrance. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. September sun gleamed against the marble of the Riverside Grand Hotel. I'd been up since 5 a.m., checking floral arrangements, confirming the cake delivery, making sure the violinist didn't get lost again. Everything had to be flawless. Jessica's vision, my execution. By 3 p.m., I'd finally changed into the navy cocktail dress she'd approved for family photos. It was supposed to be my moment too. I chanced to be seen not just as the planner, but as the sister, the family member. The one who had held it all together after Dad died. My heels echoed in the lobby as I walked toward the grand ballroom. Mental checklist ticking in my head, catering check-in at 3:15. Sound check at 3:30, makeup retouch for the bride at 4. Everything was on track. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, ma'am?" A young security guard stepped into my path, iPad in hand. "Are you with the Thompson-Bradley wedding?" "Yes," I said. "I'm Rachel Thompson, the bride's sister."
He scrolled, frowning, then scrolled again. Slower.
"I see your name," he said, "but you're listed under vendors." "Event coordinator," I blinked. "There's been a mistake." "I'm her sister. I'm sorry, ma'am. I can only go by the list the bride and her mother approved. You're authorized for vendor access only." "That's the service entrance around back." My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Where are you?" "Photographer needs you to check lighting." Not "where are you?" "Family photos starting." Not "we miss you." Just do your job. It wasn't the first time Jessica had treated me like her assistant, but this was official, documented. I wasn't a guest at my own sister's wedding. I was a name on a vendor spreadsheet. I asked the guard to call someone, my mom, specifically. 5 minutes later, Linda Thompson came gliding across the marble floor like nothing was wrong. "Rachel," she said, her voice low but pointed, "why are you causing a scene?" "I'm not on the guest list," I replied. "Security says I'm listed as a vendor." "As you should be. You're working today, aren't you?" She pulled an envelope from her clutch and handed it to me. The wedding was minutes from starting when the real show began. I was still holding that check, $3,000 for 3 months of work and $20,000 in expenses, when the venue manager approached, looking flustered. "Miss Thompson," she said, "we've received a time-sensitive legal packet for the family. From Morrison and Associates." My heart kicked into overdrive. Harold Morrison had been trying to reach me all day, his texts growing more urgent by the hour. Something about the estate. Something he said couldn't wait. Mom turned white. "We'll handle it after the ceremony," she said firmly. "I'm afraid Mr. Morrison specified before," the manager replied.
He said it's legally urgent. Jessica appeared just then.
Floating in like a vision in her $10,000 gown, one I had negotiated down from $15,000. "Mom, the photographer's ready for family portraits," she chirped. Mom waved a hand. "Rachel's just leaving." I stepped forward. "Actually, I need to review that documentation first." "As a Thompson family member." "You're not," Mom started. "My legal name is Rachel Thompson, daughter of David Thompson. That makes me a beneficiary, regardless of your vendor list." The manager blinked. Jessica stared at me like I'd grown horns. Then, from behind her, Harold Morrison stepped into the lobby, holding his leather folder like it was the Ark of the Covenant. "I'm afraid 5 minutes won't be enough," he said. "This concerns the amended will of David Thompson." A hush spread like wildfire. Harold, Mom snapped, this is highly inappropriate. You've ignored 17 certified letters, Linda, he said flatly. You left me no choice. Jessica looked panicked. What is he talking about? What will? There are no pending estate matters, Mom lied. There are, Morrison corrected, stepping forward. 2 weeks before David's death, he signed an amended will in my office. It's been registered and witnessed completely legal. The venue manager shifted uncomfortably. Guests had stopped pretending not to watch. Even the security guard looked riveted. We should discuss this privately, Mom hissed. You've had 2 years for private discussion, Morrison said. But because fraud is suspected, and because we are surrounded by witnesses familiar with David's wishes, this might actually be the perfect setting. Jessica's face drained of all color. What fraud? The 2021 will you submitted to probate, Morrison explained, was outdated. David's final will, signed in March 2023, names Rachel as the primary beneficiary of the estate, including controlling interest in Thompson Enterprises. The air went thick. You could feel the room buckle under the weight of those words. My mother swayed but stayed standing, hands clenching her clutch. Morrison turned to me. Rachel, your father left you a letter. I can read it now if you'd like.
He wrote it in case this will was ever contested or hidden.
Read it, I said. He opened the folder and pulled out a letter, his voice clear and slow as he began. To my daughter Rachel, if you're hearing this, then things have unfolded as I feared. Your mother and sister likely tried to sideline you. Linda never understood your strength. She mistook it for coldness. But what she saw as flaws, I saw as leadership. You've built something real without leaning on the family name. That's why the company and the legacy belongs with you. Jessica is not ready. She may never be. She has heart, yes, but no discipline, no vision. You, Rachel, have both. You've been my shadow, my confidant, my silent right hand, and now it's time the spotlight found you. Take the company, lead with integrity. And never, ever let them make you feel less again. Love, Dad. Silence. And then the whispers started rippling through the crowd like a wave. Cameras lifted. Phones recorded. Jessica crumpled into a chair. Mom looked ready to faint. There's more, Morrison added. David included a bad faith clause. If the amended will was hidden or contested, Jessica's portion would reduce to 10%. The remainder goes to Rachel. Linda swayed again. You knew, Jessica whispered, turning to her. You knew and lied to me. I was protecting you, Mom said weakly. You weren't ready, so you let me run the company into the ground? You let Rachel do all the work for nothing? The CFO, Margaret Howell, stood up from the executive table. We've been waiting for Rachel to take her rightful place. We've done what we could, but the company is bleeding. Morrison looked at me again. Miss Thompson, do you accept your inheritance? My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I do. Phones clicked. People gasped. Mom sat down hard. Then I said the words that would change everything. Effective immediately, I want a full audit of Thompson Enterprises. All accounts frozen. No more spending without my approval. It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a reckoning. And the real ceremony was only just beginning. By the time I said, I do, to my inheritance, the wedding had transformed into a public spectacle. Phones were out. Guests were whispering. Jessica's carefully curated fairy tale was unraveling live and in color. I turned to Morrison. Please file the inheritance documents first thing Monday morning. I want a full audit started immediately. Margaret Howell, the CFO, stepped forward without hesitation. I have the last 2 years of financials ready for your review. You've been preparing for this? Mom spat, her voice brittle. We've been hoping for this, Margaret corrected, calm and deadly. Jessica's leadership has cost us nearly $500,000 in questionable spending. Jessica, still in her wedding gown, looked stunned. Her phone buzzed. Her company card had just been declined. I'd frozen the accounts. I thought the company was fine, she said weakly. You never read a single report, Margaret replied. You just signed whatever your mother handed you. Jessica's groom stepped back, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. You told me the company was thriving, that it was your inheritance. Your success. Jessica tried to speak, but no words came out. Her carefully constructed image had collapsed in less than an hour. I pulled out my phone and called our bank, Tom, it's Rachel Thompson. Freeze all company accounts immediately. Use emergency authorization code Delta X-ray 7. Mom gasped. You had emergency authorization. Dad gave it to me 3 years ago, I said evenly. In case something like this happened. I never used it out of respect. Well, that respect ends today. Margaret's phone buzzed. Accounts frozen. All corporate credit cards deactivated. Jessica stared at her phone, blinking at the declined payment notification. Rachel. Please. Uncle Pete stood up at the family table. Your father would be proud. I shook my head. No, he'd be heartbroken. That it came to this. That his wife and daughter chose manipulation over integrity. I stepped to the front of the ballroom, microphone in hand, facing the crowd of 200 witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. But I need to clarify something. Every floral arrangement, every champagne flute, every inch of this wedding, you've admired it because I made it happen. I held up the $3,000 check Mom had handed me. This was my payment. After I spent over $20,000 out of pocket. After I was denied a seat at the family table. After I was listed as a vendor at my own sister's wedding. The crowd gasped again. Several people clapped. One guest stood and said, "Disgraceful. I won't ruin this wedding any further," I continued. "In fact, I'm leaving now. But please enjoy the evening. It's paid for by me, apparently." I turned toward the exit. "Rachel, wait," Mom said, rising to follow me. "No, you don't get to call me back when it's convenient. You don't get to keep me in the shadows and then cry foul when I step into the light." I nodded once to Margaret. "Your interim CEO effective immediately. All expenses over $5,000 need my written approval. Legal and accounting full audits by Monday." Jessica sobbed into her bouquet. Her groom backed away, stunned silent. As I reached the doors, Morrison fell into step beside me. "Your father left you something else," he said. "A private letter. For when you are ready." "I'm ready now," I said without looking back. And with that I walked out of my sister's wedding not as the help, not as the forgotten daughter but as the rightful heir. And the new head of the company my father built. I didn't answer any of Mom's 47 calls that weekend. Instead, I spent Sunday morning with Margaret Howell, seated at what was once my father's desk, now mine. We reviewed 2 years of financial carnage. The numbers didn't lie. Jessica hadn't just been inexperienced, she'd been reckless. Contracts awarded to friends for non-existent work. Consulting fees to relatives. A marketing firm with 0 deliverables billing $100,000 per quarter. At first, I thought Jessica had simply been manipulated. But the paper trail told a different story. She signed everything. She chose not to question. Even worse, $500,000 had been quietly siphoned into Mom's personal account under executive development and strategic consulting. There was no consulting, just embezzlement. Margaret looked at me across the desk. "We can press charges." I nodded slowly, staring at the evidence. "Give them 30 days to return the money in full. Then we go to court." By Monday, the legal letters were sent. By Wednesday, Mom's lawyer called, desperate to negotiate. There was no negotiation. Full repayment or criminal charges. Jessica's wedding video had already gone viral. Bride's sister reveals hidden will at wedding, trended on social media. Clips of me standing in that ballroom, accepting my inheritance with a voice steady as steel, had racked up millions of views. By the end of the second week, Jessica's new husband filed for annulment on the grounds of fraud. His family, old money conservatives, were horrified. He moved out, she moved back home. Or tried to. Mom had to sell her country club membership just to begin repaying the debt. The only thing she had left was the family home, another asset my father had protected in the will. She couldn't sell it without my permission. Jessica moved to another state and took a receptionist job at a small law firm. It was the first real job she'd ever had. No trust fund, no family company to fall back on. Just a starting salary and a time clock. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding. I reinstated 50 laid-off employees and personally called each one to tell them they still mattered. Within 3 months, Thompson Enterprises was profitable again. Investor confidence returned. 3 major contracts we'd lost under Jessica's tenure came back to the table. The board voted me in as permanent CEO, unanimously. I didn't do it alone. Uncle Pete became my advisor. Margaret became not just my CFO, but a close friend. My father's business partners became mentors. And the staff, those who'd weathered the storm, treated me not as a figurehead, but as a leader. And Mom and Jessica, they were given boundaries. Firm, immovable ones. No say in the company, no office access, no voting power. They were allowed to attend public events as guests only. Invitations were issued just like for anyone else. They could smile for photos, sip champagne. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you even a little, please subscribe and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who's been treated like the help in their own family. And drop a comment below. What boundaries have you had to set? How did you find your voice? Your stories matter, your dignity matters. And remember, your self-worth isn't negotiable. Not even for family.